They didn't adopt me to love me. They adopted me to replace him. Every photo in the house was of a boy who looked just like me, same smile, same eyes. But it wasn't me. The first night, they called me by the wrong name. Jacob. They gave me his clothes, his room, his friends. They made me study his life like a script. And when I started asking questions, they said, if you leave, you'll end up like the last one. But I wasn't the first boy they tried to erase. I was the third. The first night I moved into the Dreyer house, I didn't sleep. It wasn't the silence. It wasn't the size. It was the photos. Every wall in the house was lined with pictures, but none of them were of me. Not one. There were dozens of framed moments. Beach vacations, soccer games, birthdays with triple layer cakes. A boy my age, same dark hair, same height, smiling like he had everything in the world. But it wasn't me. I asked who he was. Mrs. Dreyer smiled like I'd asked something silly. That's Jacob, she said. You're going to love being his brother. But I wasn't adopted as their son's brother. I was adopted because Jacob was dead. They never said those words out loud. Not at first. Instead, they welcomed me like I was already family. Mrs. Dreyer made pancakes with smiley faces. Mr. Dreyer gave me a baseball glove, Jacob's old one, he said, and tossed it at me like we were old teammates. They called me Champ, Buddy, Kiddo, and sometimes Jakey. At first, I thought it was a slip. An honest mistake. But the third time, when Mrs. Dreyer looked me straight in the eyes and said, Jakey, wash up for dinner, I knew it wasn't. I said, quietly, my name is Adam. She didn't blink. She just said, of course it is. Then walked away. That night, they showed me to my room. It was too neat. Too curated. Like a set on a show. Trophies lined the bookshelf. A soccer jersey was hung on the wall. Above the desk, in perfect cursive, a nameplate, Jacob's room. I can redecorate, I said. Make it mine. Mrs. Dreyer placed a hand on my shoulder. No need, she whispered. It already is. I laid in bed that night staring at the ceiling fan as it spun. The sheets smelled like a detergent I didn't recognize. The mattress was too firm. There were drawings taped to the closet door, childish sketches signed in bold, messy letters, JD. I didn't feel adopted. I felt replaced. The next day, I asked Mr. Dreyer about Jacob. He paused mid-bite of his toast, then smiled. Jacob was special, he said. Brilliant. Athletic. Kind. He was going to do big things. Where is he now? I asked. Another pause. He's not with us anymore, he said softly. But that's why we chose you. I didn't know what that meant. So I asked, did he die? Silence. Then, Mrs. Dreyer chimed in from the sink. Don't dwell on sad things, honey. Focus on healing. That's why you're here. That afternoon, I unpacked my suitcase. But when I opened the closet, my clothes were gone. In their place were neatly hung outfits, all tagged. Jacob's outfits of fall. Khakis. Polo shirts. Identical pairs of white sneakers. On the floor, a showbox labeled, Jakey's first cleats. I never played soccer. I found my clothes in a trash bag behind the garage. Still folded. Still mine. Soaked in bleach. I didn't say anything. Not that day. Not when Mrs. Dreyer came in to help me dress for dinner. Not when she laid out one of Jacob's old button-downs and said, he looks so handsome in this. I just nodded. And put it on. At dinner, Mr. Dreyer asked me how my first day at Bridgewood Prep went. I told him it was overwhelming. He smiled and said, you always said that, Jakey. First days make you nervous. That's when I stopped chewing. Because I'd never said that. Jacob had. After dessert, they gave me a journal. Leather bound. Engraved, Jacob D., private. Inside, it was empty. The inscription on the first page read, write your truth. Rewrite your story. That night, I didn't sleep again. I lay there staring at the door, which stayed open exactly 6 inches, just like they insisted. I counted the seconds between footsteps in the hallway. And I thought about how every family photo I'd seen, every room I'd stepped into, every word they'd spoken, wasn't meant for me. It was meant for him. And somehow, they thought I was close enough. But I wasn't Jacob. I didn't want to be Jacob. And that's when I made a quiet promise to myself. If they were going to pretend I was someone else, then I'd pretend to go along with it. Until I figured out what really happened to him. Because dead or not, Jacob never really left this house. He was everywhere. And if I wasn't careful, I disappeared just like he did. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a voice in the hallway. It was Mrs. Dreyer, talking to someone softly, almost chanting. I crept out of bed, cracked the door. She stood in front of Jacob's photo, hands clasped, head bowed. He's doing better. I promise. He's almost ready. She wasn't talking to anyone. Just the picture. At breakfast, she said we were going to practice something new. Reintroduction, she called it. I didn't know what that meant until she handed me a script. It was typed, laminated, double-spaced. Title: Meeting Old Friends, Jacob's First Day Back. At the top, my name was written in Sharpie. Jakey. The script included what to say when someone asked where I'd been, who my favorite teacher was, what Jacob used to say about his dog, Toby. Favorite food: spaghetti. Favorite color: forest green. Favorite subject: physics. I said, I've never taken physics. Mrs. Dreyer laughed like I'd told a joke. You'll remember it when you hear it again. She made me read the lines out loud. Again and again. Every word had to match the phrasing. Say it like Jacob would. Smile at the end. Mr. Dreyer watched from the doorway. Said nothing. Just stared. Like he was comparing the version in front of him to someone in his memory. I got the lines wrong on purpose. Started replacing the words. Jacob loved physics. Became, I love art. Jacob's dog was Toby. Became, I never had a pet. But they didn't get mad. They got disappointed. That was worse. Mrs. Dreyer sat next to me, eyes glassy. Jakey, why are you fighting this? We just want you to be happy. We want you to be yourself again. Myself? I didn't even recognize the voice I was using anymore. A few days later, I found a USB drive taped under Jacob's desk. It was small, labeled only with a single letter, J. I plugged it into the school library computer when no one was around. Inside, a dozen files. Notes. Screenshots. Voice memos. Emails. The first email was to someone named Coach M. I can't keep doing this. They think I'm lying when I say I don't remember things. But I do. I remember everything. And they won't stop until I disappear too. The next file was a recording. Jacob's voice. If anything happens to me, it's because I told the truth. They don't want the truth. They want a performance. I copied everything. Put the drive in my backpack and kept it there. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not because I was scared, but because I finally knew something no one else did. Jacob tried to escape. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I went back into Jacob's closet. Checked every shelf, every corner, every drawer. In the back, behind a box of old shoes, I found a composition notebook. Torn. Scribbled in. Pages missing. But one sentence was underlined 3 times on the last page. They said if I didn't become him, they'd find someone who would. Suddenly, everything clicked. They didn't just lose a son. They replaced him. And if I didn't become Jacob, they'd erase me too. The next morning, Mr. Dreyer drove me to school. Only, he didn't take the normal route. We pulled into an unfamiliar parking lot. A one-story brick building with no signs. Inside, a woman greeted us with a clipboard and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Welcome, Jacob, she said. Before I could speak, Mr. Dreyer leaned in and whispered, This is where you'll learn to be better. It wasn't a school. It was a conditioning center. I wasn't the first to be brought there. And I wouldn't be the last. They called it a wellness session, a chance to reconnect with who I really was. But the building didn't look like any wellness center I'd ever seen. It looked like a doctor's office that forgot how to be warm, with white walls, blank clocks, and no magazines. They took my phone, sat me in a cold room with a single chair and a 2-way mirror. Then he walked in. Dr. Wallace. Bald. Smooth-voiced. Movements like he was gliding. You must be Jacob, he said. I didn't answer. He smiled. That's okay. I know you're still adjusting. For the first 10 minutes, he didn't ask questions. He made statements. You've been having memory confusion. You're struggling with past life identity. You feel overwhelmed because this version of you is dormant. I told him, my name is Adam. He nodded, jotted something down. That's a common dissociative alias. Protective identity. But not the real one. I laughed. He didn't. He showed me flashcards. Photos. Some were of Jacob. Some were of me. He asked which ones felt familiar. I said none of them. He said, that's trauma blocking recognition. Then he handed me a photo of Jacob smiling with the Dreyers, a soccer ball under his arm, and said, this is who you used to be. And it's who you're meant to be again. The session lasted an hour. When I walked out, the Dreyers were waiting with open arms. Mrs. Dreyer cried and said, you look more like him every day. Back home, my real name disappeared completely. The school changed my records. Emails came addressed to Jacob Dreyer. My ID badge was reprinted. The school counselor said, identity updates are standard during placement transitions. I tried to tell her I hadn't changed it. She said, maybe you just forgot you did. That night, I found a folder in my backpack. Therapy homework, Jacob Dreyer. Inside, a questionnaire about reclaimed identity. A vocabulary sheet with phrases like, when I remember who I am, I feel, and a list titled Things to Forget. Birth name. Biological relatives. Old schools. Adam. They were trying to overwrite me. one session at a time. But what they didn't know was, I still had Jacob's USB drive. And on it, I found something new. A hidden folder labeled, Backup Truth. Inside were photos, screenshots, chat logs. But one file stood out. A voice memo. Jacob's voice, shaking this time, barely holding it together. They took me to the clinic again. Said my memories were symptoms. That I should be grateful for the chance to be fixed. But I'm not broken. And neither is the boy after me. If you're hearing this, if you're next, don't let them erase you. That night, I opened the Jacob's Room journal, the leather one Mrs. Dreyer gave me on day one. I flipped to the first page, the one that said, Write your truth. Rewrite your story. So I did. With a Sharpie. My name is Adam. I'm not your son. I'm not your story. Then I tore out the page and slid it under their bedroom door. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the Dreyers arguing behind closed doors. Something about moving too fast. Something about losing him again. I pretended to be asleep when Mrs. Dreyer peeked into my room. She whispered, It's okay, Jakey. Regression is part of the process. But she was wrong. Because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't regressing. I was remembering. At school, I snuck into the counselor's office during lunch. Found my student file in the cabinet. Inside was an adjustment timeline. It listed every step of my reintegration into the Jacob persona. Dates. Therapy notes. Progress reports. Even mood charts. One note stood out. Current subject responds well to auditory correction. Total identity assimilation expected by week 6. I wasn't a person. I was a project. And suddenly, I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. I went home and told the Dreyers I wanted to start making videos, like Jacob used to. They were thrilled. Mrs. Dreyer cried. Mr. Dreyer bought me a camera. They didn't know what I planned to use it for. That night, I hid it in my room, pointed at the door, set to record, and waited. I didn't sleep the night I set up the camera. I just laid there in Jacob's bed, wide awake, staring at the red light blinking on the device I'd hidden in the bookshelf. I was done playing their game. I wanted to see what happened when I wasn't pretending anymore. It was just after 3 and when the door creaked open. Soft footsteps. A shape stepped into the room. Mrs. Dreyer. She stood there in the dark for almost 2 minutes, watching me. Then whispered, He's slipping again. Another voice from the hallway, Mr. Dreyer. We'll take him back to Wallace. Like the last one. They closed the door. Like the last one. The next morning, I checked the footage. Clear audio. Clear image. Proof. I uploaded it to an encrypted drive, gave it a fake name, and shared it to an email I created that no one else knew about just in case. Because I finally understood, they weren't trying to heal me. They were trying to recreate Jacob. And if I failed, I'd end up like the last one. I needed to know what happened to him. The real Jacob. The one whose bed I slept in. Whose name they gave me like a costume. The one they swore had passed, but never explained how. I started searching everywhere in the house they told me not to go. The attic. The shed. The crawl space. Most of it was clean. Too clean. Except for the basement. The locked door behind the laundry room. I waited until they left for therapy session planning. Used the spare key I'd found taped under the sink. The stairs creaked as I stepped down. It smelled like dust and wet wood. Old paint cans lined the wall. A broken bike. Some cardboard boxes. And in the far corner, a trunk. Big, heavy, covered in stickers. I opened it. Inside, a sweatshirt, a pair of worn-out sneakers, a journal, all labeled JD. Property. The journal wasn't Jacob's regular writing. These were desperate entries. Scratched in pen. Messy. Shaking. They said I failed. That I didn't hold the memory right. Dear. Wallace keeps asking who I was before. I keep saying myself. And he says that's not an answer. They told me if I left, I'd vanish like the last one. But I am the last one. The last page just said, Help me. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I noticed something behind the trunk. A small wooden panel. I pried it loose. Behind it, an envelope. Dusty. Yellowed. Inside, a single photograph. Grainy. Polaroid. Faded from time. A boy standing in the backyard, smiling, holding a sign that read, My name is Ethan. Not Jacob. Please remember me. It wasn't Jacob. It was someone else. Another boy. Another replacement. I checked the back of the photo. Written in shaky marker. Subject #2. Memory failed. Reassign identity 12 by 18. Jacob wasn't the first. I wasn't the second. I was the third. I ran upstairs. Locked the door. Pulled the USB, the camera files, the journal, everything I had, and zipped it into a master folder titled, They Erased Us. I had to get out. Tonight. But at dinner, they were already ahead of me. Mrs. Dreyer set the table like nothing was wrong. Mr. Dreyer handed me a letter. We've scheduled an intensive overnight evaluation, he said. AR. Wallace wants to fast-track your progress. I didn't answer. Because I couldn't stop staring at the envelope. It was labeled, Final Conditioning Clearance, Jacob Dreyer. I pushed my plate aside. I'm not going. They both froze. Mrs. Dreyer's smile cracked. Jakey. Don't be dramatic. This is part of your healing. I'm not Jacob. She stood up slowly, her hands trembling. If you leave now, they'll do to you what they did to the last one. And no one will look for you. Mr. Dreyer added, almost gently. We gave you everything. A name. A future. A family. No, I said. You gave me a role. And I'm not playing anymore. That night, I didn't run through the front door. I snuck out the back window. Took the bike. The folder. And the photo of Ethan. I rode straight to Ridgewood PD. Walked in, slammed the evidence on the counter, and said, I think my adoptive family's been replacing boys and erasing their lives. The officer stared at me like I was insane. Until he opened the folder. Until he saw the files. The recordings. The photo of a boy no one had ever reported missing. I spent 12 hours in a police station lobby. Cold bench. Stale coffee. Officers walking by, giving me strange looks. I thought they wouldn't believe me. Until they called a detective. Until he sat down across from me and said, We ran Jacob Dreyer's file. No cause of death ever recorded. No death certificate. No trace. He looked at the photo of Ethan again. Then at me. And said the words I'd waited weeks to hear. You did the right thing coming here. The investigation took weeks. Child Protective Services got involved. They pulled files. Interviewed neighbors. Dug through old adoption records. And what they found was worse than I imagined. The Dreyers had applied for 3 adoptions in the last 6 years. All boys. All around the same age. All eerily similar to Jacob in appearance. Only I was ever officially documented. The other 2? One was listed as a temporary foster placement that ended without follow-up. The other? No record at all. No background. No exit file. Just a date of intake. And then nothing. The house was raided. The basement, where I found Ethan's photo, had been partially remodeled. Hidden behind one wall, they found a crate of items. A journal labeled E. A phone. Water damaged but recoverable. A hospital wristband with a last name no one recognized. The name on it? Ethan Rowe. They contacted his biological mother. She thought her son had been moved to another home after she lost custody. She never saw him again. Until now. She cried when she saw the photo. Said he loved making puppets out of old socks. Said his favorite snack was apple slices with cinnamon. Said she never stopped waiting. They found Jacob's real file too. He'd been a Ridgewood prep student. A top student. Captain of the soccer team. Then, one semester, he vanished. The school listed him as a transfer. No forwarding information. No goodbye post. Just erased. I wasn't just living in Jacob's room. I was wearing his ghost. The Dreyers were arrested 2 weeks later. Charged with psychological coercion, falsifying adoption records, intentional identity erasure, abuse under long-term guardianship. They pled not guilty. Said I was emotionally unstable. That I had hallucinated the entire narrative. But then, detectives play the recordings. They read the therapy transcripts. They opened the journals. They heard Mrs. Dreyer whispering to the photo in the hallway. The jury didn't need long. Guilty. On every count. Dr. Wallace lost his license. The wellness center was shut down. A civil suit was filed on behalf of Ethan's biological family. Another one for Jacob's. And me? I walked out of the courtroom with no last name. Just a new notebook. A blank one. I live with a foster family now. They're quiet, kind, real. They don't call me Jacob. They don't ask me to be anyone I'm not. They just let me be. Sometimes, I dream about the house. The smell of bleach. The way the hallway light never turned all the way off. The sound of her voice saying, he's slipping again. But I don't wake up scared anymore. I wake up grateful. Because I'm not locked inside someone else's life. I'm writing my own. The last time I saw Jacob's journal, it was in the evidence folder. I asked the detective what would happen to it. He said it'd be archived with the case. I asked if I could have a copy. He said yes. I keep it next to my bed now. Not because I want to remember what they did, but because I want to remember what they couldn't. They couldn't erase him. And they couldn't erase me. They never wanted a son. They wanted a second chance to control one. But I survived. And now? I'm not their son. I'm not their story. I'm just me. And I'm still here.